Hello, friends. My name is Christina Grozik, and I'm with a documentary called Going which is an exploration into the world of sound, vibration, frequency, silence, energy, and how it is all connected. And because these things are so important, decided to continue the discussions around them. And today I've got a very special guest here with me. I am so excited to be able to speak with her. We've got Dr. Kathleen Riley. And wow, wait until you hear the list of everything she's done. It's incredible that one person can do this much, right? She is a HeartMath Institute certified trainer. She's former faculty at the Cleveland Institute of Music. She was a biofeedback specialist at the world-renowned Cleveland Clinic. She's been playing the piano since the age of 4. She's got 3 degrees in classical piano, and she now can hold the title of filmmaker. She did a research project called Intention, the Power of the Heart. So hello and welcome, Kathleen.
Oh, thank you, Christine. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, it's always so good to connect with you, Dr. Riley. I from the first time that we connected, I'm like, oh, and it's one of those things that the time goes by, and I'm like, oh my gosh, So yeah, but I'm so happy that you're here. So I want to talk a little bit about, well, there's so much to talk about, but I think I want to start with your documentary. So it is such a powerful piece that you have put together. And, maybe can you tell us a little bit about what the documentary is? We're looking at 4 musicians. We're talking about heart rate signals. We're talking about shared intention. So can you kind of tell us about the documentary?
I'd be glad to. I'm going to also tell the audience a little bit about how there's a few pieces to understand from here. I end with a degree in piano performance, a PhD, and then suddenly how to get into the world of biofeedback. So this kind of will weave very nicely into why the documentary of the research. And in my postdoctoral studies, I became very intrigued with how musicians and performers were suffering from a lot of misuse and overuse injuries in playing, not interacting with their instruments correctly, but also really noticing the amount of performance anxiety, stress, and depression. And I took courses at New York University in neurophysiology and psychology to begin to learn more deeply about how I could address this and how I could help people in performing arts shift into a more resilient way of performing. So after that, I became very interested in a form of biofeedback for our muscles. And I began working with people with that and video, and did a lot of research with this, being able to show that when you're in one position, your muscles are going to fire too much. And then from there, it was a natural progression to go into exploring some of the HeartMath Institute's tools and techniques in terms of how to help people handle stress and anxiety and to shift and reset themselves. And I found that these were very, very powerful when we use the two together. So when I now begin to come in the door, we'll go back to that in more of our discussion, but coming through the door of the documentary, I particularly wanted to do a study with, I chose a string quartet, so 4 musicians, and to look at the effects of all 4 of these musicians, or to perform the same piece of music together. It was actually the Pachelbel canon. What feelings, attitudes, thoughts they were intending to put into this, how they were feeling, what did they want the audience people to feel, to share. And when you do research, first of all, you have to have a couple of different variables going on. So we had everybody just get together and they all knew the music, and I had HeartMath Institute come and help me. We collaborated on this, and we had everybody monitored with on-the-body monitors for their hearts. So 4 musicians, and we had 8 audience members. And when the musicians came for the first session, they just they warmed up together, and then we brought the audience in, and they performed 2 pieces. It was the Pachelbel canon, and it was a divertimento by Mozart. And at that point, I dismiss the audience. And then, of course, as all good researchers do, you have to introduce another type of intervention. So I decided, oh, well, let me work with their posture, because that was the first door into my work with performing artists. And I gave everybody certain exercises, and they got really excited. So long story short, that didn't really have a big effect on the stress, anxiety. And then we wove it around, because the whole purpose of this was to bring it into the heart and into the idea of the attitude, the intention, and the emotion that you're choosing to put in. And when they began working with that as a shared intention among themselves, this is where there was a shift that happened. The 4 quartet members, after the second performance, which happened after they had practiced at home with the physical movements for their technique, they then received, each of them received a Bluetooth sensor to use with the app on their phone for inner balance. And at that time, they were then taught how to begin the breathing techniques and how to practice. I did something very unique, because I said to them, I am a musician. I performed for many years on stage in New York City and in Europe. But I said, we're not going to go the traditional route here. We're not going to have you get together and rehearse. Rather, I invite you to get together in pairs on Zoom calls and to share that time with your monitors on in practicing these breathing techniques, creating what we call in HeartMath the coherence. So alignment of the emotions, the heart, and the mind, brain, but everything is aligned and in sync. And I love those 3, because when I think about, well, who's the driver of the train, it's the attitude, emotion. So when they started to do these practices together, their coherence scores started to go up. And they worked with this among themselves, with each other, for 3 weeks. Not a long period of time, but 2018, when this research was conducted, we had some pretty bad fires up here in Northern California. And I knew, if I try to get them to stay longer with what was going on, it was a really stressful time. So for the last performance, and of course, they were kind of kicking and screaming with me a little bit, because they didn't get a full rehearsal. So we got back together for the 3rd final performance, and they got to warm up. But interestingly, they had done this work. And of course, I had them do a shared heart lock-in, if you will, sitting as the quartet and just really generating these feelings, not only toward each other, but here's a really big piece of it, toward their instrument. Why? You got to co-create the sound. So here they are, and they're in this intention build, and the audience walks in. The audience was a little puzzled at first, because the quartet members were just sitting quietly. So they came in, and we began the performance. And it was different. There was a shift. You could feel a different energy, if you will, in the room. Now, remind you all that they're being monitored. So we're like, okay, are we going to see any differences? Now, we did get an effect at a group level. We weren't, in fact, measuring for everybody to have the same coherence. That was, this was what we call a pilot study, where we kind of allow ourselves to play around in the sandbox, and see, what are we going to see? What are we going to discover? And it was pretty profound, because at the end of this, in addition to getting these quantitative results that, we shifted, everybody shifted, we got responses from the audience. They heard the same pieces 3 times, that they heard things in this music, Christine, they had never heard before. They felt a different type of communication among the musicians. They felt more of the emotions. And then when the musicians began to reflect, you know, interestingly, our society has brought us into feelings of, if we are not perfect, you know, we made a mistake. And I realized they kind of went into default right after in terms of what they thought they may have done wrong. And yet when they reflected upon this process, they all said, you know, it really was different. It was deeper. It was an entirely different way of approaching music. For me, this is the heart of the matter, and why, when I was 4 years old and I went to the piano, I fell in love with the sound. Now, that was the first seed that has to be nurtured. And we are here to remind people to go back to bringing an intention in and to begin to nurture it. And when I created the little story through the documentary, I just said, you know, it's just here to plant a seed. And for us all to remember and remind ourselves that when we first get inspired to learn something, what's that seed? What's that spark? And you carry it with you. So that's really the behind the scenes. And then, of course, you know, the universe decided that this needed to be done. So I got a couple people funded me a little bit of money, and that got given to the nonprofit. Chico State University said, oh yeah, we'll get an IRB. Sure, let's run it through the music department. I wasn't on faculty. And then, you know, the first videographers who were in it, the head got really, really sick. So then another miracle happens, and I get refunded part of this money that had been given in to create this film. And now I've got a disc that was formatted at the time for Mac, and I have 3 PCs, and I took it to a film company in Redding, California, where I live. And they formatted the disc. And when I went to pick it up the next day, the young man doing it said, wow, this is really interesting. Let us know if you would like some help with it. So then we started having a talk, a conversation. And all of a sudden, they said yes. So I gave them the rest of the money, and it cost another couple thousand. But the day I was invited down, this is so miraculous, to go to the studio to create a storyboard. I got there, and the director met me at the door. He says, let's go have coffee. I said, okay. And we sat down in the coffee shop, and he pulled out a 7-page script. He says, I haven't been able to sleep. And, you know, he saw this vision with me. He's the one who said, okay, well, we're gonna bring in Michael, the first violinist, and have him share his story because he lives here. And we're gonna bring in Roland McCready from HeartMath, you know, because you collaborated with him. I said, okay. And let's get Ted, your mentor from NYU. And he had this vision. And when something is ready to happen, and my favorite word is you allow, it comes to life. So I had no idea. But it's here. And I'm so happy to share it with everyone, because I know it's gone around the world a couple of times, and it's just a simple, it's 14 minutes, but you know, it offers us that window into the power of intention, the power of intentionality, and that we are to focus our attention on our intentions focus your attention on your intentions. We can get really sidetracked these days with all that's going on in our world. And we can get really fired up about what we want to prove. Now, take a moment. As my mom used to say to me as a little girl when I get awfully cranky, and she'd say, take a breath. It's not the what you're saying, it's the how. And the how became, as I grew older, and of course now I'm studying piano and I'm living piano from age 4 on, it was really the modulation. And the modulation of sound comes through in both music, in sound healing instruments such as the singing bowls, and in our spoken communication with one another, based on modulations within the overtones, the undertones, the nuances of the voice that can either push someone away or invite them in to listen deeply. So deep listening will bring us to a point where we're basically in sympathetic resonance with each other, because we can allow and stay in a beautiful place in our hearts of neutrality. Yes, it's difficult, but as we make these things today a part of our life, a part of our practice, and what more beautiful way to understand it than through how it affected the sound of a piece of music, how it came through. And our dear friend, Jonathan Goldman, he and I have many deep dive conversations about this. And in his book years ago, Healing Sounds, he was not an experiment, but he referenced having gone to hear the same symphony orchestra perform the same exact piece of music. So same musicians, same music, conducted by 2 different conductors. That's what started this inspiration, along with one other person I'll bring in a minute, about this study. And I said, oh, because I'm a researcher. I was like, wait, there's only one variable here? And he went on to tell the differences in his response kinetically, and how he had a more positive response to the first conductor and a completely different response to heart rate, respiratory rate, muscle testing to the second. So the attitude, the intention of those 2 conductors was very different. And he knew a little bit about them. So I don't want to go into those details because they weren't a study, but it was just the fact that we've all been in an experience, every single one of us, where you enter a room and there's somebody, or somebody enters the room and they're mad, and you feel it, it's palpable.
Yeah.
That's palpable. And we know through HeartMath Institute that our heart is an electromagnetic field extending out from our body in all directions, only a few feet, but still it's going out, and it is radiating in the field. So it's palpable. So when our intentions come from a place that are even the idea of neutrality and respect, and we're sharing that through sound, something changes. We also see in a room, that's what happened even in this study, because there was one musician in the group who was a little bit more skeptical of this whole process. But even she aligned, was in sync for this, because this is how sympathetic resonance works. people can come in that room and be angry. Yet, if you're staying in that beautiful space of coherence, it's an invitation for them to come join you. And over again, we see that person's heart rate variability signal shift.
Yeah,
So it's how we create
how that happens. It's incredible how that happens. And I think there's, whether for me, it's, it's my puppy. You cannot be upset or in a bad mood or anything when you look at that sweet little face and that creature, right? Or a certain person, that it's almost impossible to be in a bad mood when you're around them. So yeah, I think our vibration, we definitely have the capability, I believe, like you, to help raise each other up. And I think finding that coherence and that balance with one another, even when it's difficult. And I know you had mentioned, that sometimes it can, but I think it's all a practice, and
well, and the practice,
every day.
make it really simple.
Yeah.
When I taught these courses at the Cleveland Institute of Music, and my students worked in a biofeedback lab with the HeartMath techniques as well as the muscle biofeedback. But I would say, you know what? You're not always going to be able to bring in a feeling or attitude of love. It's always not going to be the necessary one. But find one thing, take a breath, and find one thing in that moment. Look out the window, or think of someone, or immediately bring that to mind, to inner vision, and be grateful. Be grateful. And it's the attitude of gratitude that in the documentary, the first violinist said, what was his big takeaway? Gratitude. Gratitude.
Yeah, let me ask you this. So I know recently I've had a couple of people. I just actually did a video about this because when things pop up on my path and they keep repeating, I know it's hey, pay attention to us, right? And I did. I just did a video about this topic. A lot of people have reached out recently telling me that they are having a tough time finding joy, finding motivation, finding that spark and that fire within, finding happiness for others when they have successes. And I really appreciate the courage that it took for people to share this with me. And I've had multiple people in different situations over the past couple of weeks do that. So for someone that is having a really tough time finding something to be grateful for, are there any exercises or tips that you could give them to tap into that space?
Yes, absolutely. When the car fire hit here in 2018, I did have a few people from Reading come and see me privately. And one woman, I can share her story because it's so profound. She had lost everything. The house, the car, everything was gone. Luckily, she and her husband had a place to stay. A friend had a guest house, but it was still, and she was having real trouble during a day, going from task to task, even getting in the car to drive over to check on her mom. And this was out of her scope of reality. And in a state of trauma such as this, and I also have a certification from HeartMath in the trauma recovery, but there is a feeling, the brain gets a detour. And so one day she couldn't come up with any emotions. It was just kind of like she couldn't name them. I said, all right, I got this good idea. Now she had a Bluetooth sensor. She had already gotten that. I said, how about we have a mantra here? And she says, ooh, what do you want? What are you thinking? I said, how about I got this? Now, I said, say that. She goes, yeah, I got this. So did it again. I got this. I said, all right. I said, now let's think about what that embodies. It's 3 simple words. What does it embody that you begin to generate? And you don't have to try to find those words because they're not coming. It's generating confidence. It's generating courage. It's generating trust. Oh man, they're three of the top for shifting into coherence. So she began to take little stick-it notes and put one on her steering wheel and one on the refrigerator. And it was really cute because I said, okay, we put the reminders up. And then she would do this, sit, take 2 minutes of heart-focused breathing with this idea coming in the morning. And then before she would start her day and it was ready to go out the door, she'd stand at the door and she'd take another 2 minutes. I got this. We're doing it. She'd get in the car. Let's say that she went to her mom's and she'd go over there and she'd stop the car and say, okay, sit in the car, put your monitor on. I got this. Whew. She went in to the mom, had her visit. Good. She's calmer. She's feeling better. Back in the car. I said, okay, back in the car. Now there's I got this comes in along with some gratitude, doesn't it? Oh man, yeah. I said, okay. So now we bring in the gratitude piece because that was different. Then she was able to go to her next task. So it was like I call it going in the back door of the barn. And it's very hard when we look at and we know that the attitudes and the emotions have the effect. But to grab onto the emotion, like you were saying, no, you're not feeling it. But what do I want to feel? I want to feel, I got this. Okay, I can walk from here to there. Okay, I got this. I'm tracking. I can do this one. There's a light bulb that goes off. The amygdala, that emotional memory bank of the brain that's got this, it's on fire, starts to calm down. The neurochemicals that are going on from that trigger. Okay, so whenever I'm in that fear, panic, worry, I am generating full bore my adrenaline and cortisol coming out from the centers of my brain. Now remember, my heart signals are going up to the brain and they travel faster than any signal goes down to the heart. So the heart is responding to all those attitudes. And if that attitude is still, I'm afraid, then the brain is going to keep generating your cortisol. Now, one of the things that's pretty wild about this is that you might get through that scary thing, but the shutoff valve to the cortisol doesn't happen right away. And unless we have the ability to shift and reset ourselves with an attitude like, I got this, it's going to keep trickling. So now I got this. What happens? Oh, signal up to the brain. Brain says, oh, we're good. Okay. Plugs the leak to the cortisol. Shuts it. What does it do now? Oh, so cool. It opens up your own neurochemical store. Serotonin, melatonin, DHEA, it's right there. You immediately feel different. And you can be doing this kind of work. We always recommend a nice, evenly paced inhale and exhale. So I'm sure I know you had an interview with Roland, and this is just part of what we do because we want the heart rate signal. We want to kind of even out the inhale, exhale, because when we're all fearful and worried, we hold our breath. So we want to keep remembering breath, right? Breathe. I always invite people to listen to the breath because it's got sound. Just become focused there for a minute. It calms the worry brain. It calms the thinking brain. But the I got this one, that turned out to be a winner for a lot of people. And then later on, as they were building the resilience and they were building coherence, they were able to get back in touch with other emotions again. And yeah, it is hard at times to feel gratitude, or it's hard to not have judgment at times. But you just, if I say I got this, I can shut off any worry about all of those other pieces for the moment. And it gives my body a chance to come back to regulation. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I did talk with Dr. McCready, and we mostly talked. So I'm going to go back here and ask you about a couple of the terms that you just shared and a couple.
Okay, great.
Yeah, because we mostly talked about the heart and the brain and the connection between the Earth's magnetic field
Okay.
and human resonance. So we talked about a slightly different area here. But you were talking, so you just talked a little bit about the breath, right, and that wave and that consistency. And you mentioned the term heart-focused breathing. So for someone that's not really familiar with the HeartMath Institute,
oh yeah, let me take that one. So this is really easy, everybody, because your lungs, where you breathe, you feel it, inhale, exhale, and right in front of the lungs is the heart. Okay, so I want to focus my attention as I'm breathing. First of all, I want to sit upright. I want to really be kind of grounded and planted on my sit bones if I'm sitting, and soften the belly. You want to not breathe in the chest. You want to let the breath go down, but all the breath enters in the lungs. But now let it fill the lower cavity. Now just focus your attention right here, because that's the entry point. But as we feel and think about the breath going down, it's really good because we get to take deeper breaths and they go into the lower lung as well. And now imagine that heart, remember I said it's this little electromagnetic field going out. Okay, so I'm firing up that electromagnetic field. My breath and my I got this, or whatever I'm bringing in, that's creating a different energy here, right? All the good stuff that's going up. Okay, so now we take those signals, and this is my favorite spot, the thalamus. So I have many centers. It goes to the amygdala, and that's the one I mentioned just before, because that's my trauma brain. That's what gets really sidetracked. You go through the fire, or you go through something horrific. So if we're sending up these feelings of confidence, courage, calm, okay, I'm telling my amygdala, okay, we're all right, we're all right. I'm going up to other centers, and I get into higher ones as I go to higher corners. I'm only going to talk about one other one today, but we go to what I call my sweet spot, the thalamus. And the thalamus is receiving the signals from my heart. So it's either receiving the signal of worry, fear, anger, judgment, if that's the side of the fence I'm on. Okay, it's a different message. Or it's giving a signal from that gratitude, appreciation, I got this, all those goodies that are in that. And that is number one, shutting off your shatter brain. When we focus on the breathing and give our attention to something else, everyone, it gives you a place to focus for a moment. That's really important. Otherwise, the boomerang in the head wants to bring you back to the argument you were having before. I don't want to go back to the argument right now. I'm going to focus on my breath. I'm going to focus on my I got this, or whatever. That in itself now, from my thalamus, I'm saying to everybody, okay, we got this, we're good. The thalamus is also the part of my brain which receives and sends signals through my senses. Whoa. Sight, my visual, my hearing, my kinetic, tactile, smell, taste. totally different. Now, as a musician, or, sharing my sound through my throat chakra, my message, that sends a different message, doesn't it? Because there's a different vibration or frequency coming through. And I don't know if you want me to go here now. I can, but I'll ask the question, because you know me, I'm just going. So
You're good.
I don't know. It's like the train is running here. But I mean, this is part of what I investigated in my PhD doctoral research. I don't know. I'll maybe say a couple words about that. What do you think?
Yeah. Let's touch base on that.
So when I really want, and it's always been my intention since probably since I was 4 years old, but to have people understand the nuances in sound and what happens in really the space between the notes. And I'm going to give an example first of me as pianist. So I'm the pianist and I hit notes on a keyboard, and it's more like a percussive thing. I strike a key and the hammer goes down and it hits the key. And once I strike that key, Christine, I can't make it louder. I can't make it vibrato. And if it's out of tune, it's not my fault. Okay. But then how on earth do I create a melody or a sound of something that gets louder, gets softer, gets faster, gets slower? How does that occur? Going back to my thalamus. It's happening in the communication between my inner ear, internal, okay? Inner ear is getting, I'm going to call it, not always an auditory signal at the level of hearing. Okay? Just follow me for a minute. There's a frequency that comes through in that, what we call, in science, they call it the third ear. Remember, my thalamus has my senses connected. So as pianist, I imagine I have this amazing superhighway from my inner ear down my arm, out my fingertips. And the messages are also being transmitted to my hands and fingers in terms of just how to create the sound in time that is coming through me. And I decided to look more deeply at this. How are performers performing the same piece of music and it's so different? And I stumbled upon in the 1990s the use of a music software editing that allowed this performance that was done on an acoustic disc clavier piano, which measures the MIDI measurements. It allowed the sound to be displayed as a piano roll, which means it didn't look like a score of notated score, which shows me everything, which looks very mathematical. All the bars look the same, the notes look the same, but it showed me that particular performer's interpretation. It was like, oh, it's scrolling across the screen, but oh, those notes are longer. Oh, that got louder. Oh, that got faster. That got slower. And of course, then I could go in and get exact data measurements within the software. And I could show these minuscule differences and similarities. What's interesting is that when the students who participated in the study just heard performances alone. So I'm going to talk now about how do we really listen. Let's talk about effective communication. Let's talk about sympathetic resonance. When they just heard the performances, they were very critical. I used to call them, oh, you want a job with the New York Times. Okay. Music critic. Oh, I didn't like that. Or I did, and then I'd say, well, could you consider which of those performers had the most dynamic contrast? And I'd hear over and over again, oh, I don't know. I wasn't really listening. I wasn't paying attention. How many times, everyone, do we really during the day notice that we're not paying attention, that there's a to-do list or something running through here that is also pulling my attention. When the students experienced seeing and hearing these performances, well, totally different. They saw what they called crystal clear images of the sound in time, but they began to get a deeper understanding and appreciation. So there's a researcher who wrote a lot about music perception, John Sloboda, and his famous quote is, "We all must learn how to listen and what to listen for." Well, my friends, this is not just about music. This is about communication, authentic communication from the heart that we openly allow in a neutral space the chance to truly hear what's there. Interestingly, as a teaching tool, I decided, yeah, you know what? I'm going to have you, if you actually understand what somebody's doing, saying, if you will, in that, as a student, like if I'm a painter, I'm going to study the masters and I'm going to imitate. We should technically be able to imitate. And by golly, when they had the graph of the soundification graph, they could imitate timings of these phrases. And they could do pretty good imitations of the dynamics. They went within the normal ranges. But at the end, it was not to make them copycats. It was to introduce vocabularies of sound as a toolbox. Well, I look at the idea of vocabulary of sound, of inviting all of us into listening to one another, with one another. For each one has a unique vocabulary, an intention or inflection that comes through. And to hold in abeyance for just a few moments the judgment. Just listen, to be in that space of listening. I feel sound has this ability to teach it. And I call both of my research studies, I call it, the exploratory, going in the back door of the barn. I go in the back door to go in the back door of the house. So I had to go in through something nobody was paying attention to, go in the next level, and then you get in what I call the living room of the heart. Then we're bringing everything into this coherence and this alignment. But to go in the front door, talking to people about their attitudes and emotions, is met with a lot of this. So when we can take music and sound and just have it be inviting for people to listen, to create a space. And one of the things I love using visual feedback with sound is it's interesting. I'm just really realizing this now. It focuses people's attention on the sound, because they can't be multitasking. I can't grab my phone. I can't look at my phone. I can't, I'm focused. And in that space, what we're doing in our brain centers is we're bringing other levels of higher cortical functioning into alignment. We're stilling different parts of the brain, and we're allowing certain trap doors that are locked shut to open up. That's a whole other topic for a different day, but it's like we focusing attention. So with the HeartMath, I focused here. With sound in this new teaching awareness, it's to have visual perception be affecting auditory perception, which affects visual perception. Like they interplay, they're completely mingled. We are in a very visual society. This work began in the 90s, and I was noticing a difference in all my students. And we can all reflect back. I remember those glorious first days in a PhD, 1990, New York University in the Village, and we weren't computerized. I didn't own a cell phone, and I stood in lines around the building to register. What fun! I actually talked with people. I wasn't like, oh, wait, ding, ding, ding. And I was really engaged. And the difference in the way we hear a lot, and I love technology. I love the video world. I love it. However, we have often had hearing, listening. We are hearing sounds as auditory cues for something visual. It's all the ding dongs on your phone. Now, okay, we have to bring that back into balance. It's really about the deep listening. So that's really the core of even what I did with the documentary. It was about the deep listening. And how do I get there?
Yeah, there's so much to be found in the listening. And I know my personal journey, the sound is what brought me to the silence and created that space. So, I mean, with your work and what you're doing and intention and the listening side of it, I mean, I love what you're doing. I think it's fascinating. The fact that you have been able to take these three different people playing the same exact song and show visually how every single one is different. I mean, we can feel it, we can hear it, but to see it is a whole nother thing. And then with your documentary too, you know, taking the same piece of music, having four musicians play it, and measuring that. And I want to go back to that really quickly. I know we're running out of time. I have a few more questions for you, but I do, again, Dr. McCready and I had talked about completely different things. So for someone that may say, well, what was the monitor thing they were talking about? What was that? Can you tell us a little bit about what that is to connect it?
Okay, so when one of the people from the HeartMath Institute came up for the study, there's a monitor that goes on, which is not the same kind of Bluetooth monitor I'm going to use with the app, because it's measuring the actual heart rate signal. So it's placed on the person's body. There's one sensor that goes over here and one by the heart. And the woman from HeartMath was doing this, and she also had a student volunteer to help. So everyone was these were put on, and then they had to sit for, I think, 10 minutes quietly to get a baseline. And then this was monitoring the heart rate variability, the activity from that point on. When each performance began, they had stopwatches, and they were marking exactly the time when, like, the Pachelbel was beginning to be played. They were then marking the time when it stopped. They were marking the time so that the data analyst could go in and look what happened and go across all the graphs. That's a very biggie for the geeky scientists that we are, you know. But for daily people, we then have a monitor that is a sensor that takes your pulse. So it goes on your earlobe, and it measures pulse. And then it's Bluetooth, but it connects to an app on the phone. And your signal from your pulse reflects your heart rate variability. And then that is read. And then the app is actually showing that, and it's reflecting based on colors. So if you're in green, you're in the better coherence level. But then there's average coherences, which can go range very, very high. And that is how we teach people to shift and reset. The training of police officers in the Netherlands. It's been done through the entire country. And this is, they're trained by trainers who are police officers themselves. It is the core of their resilience training. And it's very, very powerful because they will be using not the monitor with the app, but they use the little, it's a handheld one we call the M-Wave. And the officer who's training will be watching someone. Say they're in a shooting practice, they're target practicing. And he watches, and when the monitor goes to the green, he tells the person, okay, you're in coherence now. And then they shoot. And then they begin to learn. They can feel in their body. When you're in sync, you get it after practicing. But you need the monitor in the beginning. It's what I call a barometer. Where am I? Am I coherent or am I not? I don't know. And I had a musician in Cleveland who had worked with me for a long time with the muscle biofeedback. And she was a high-level amateur and a physician at the clinic. And she was creating a video of her playing for a piano festival she wanted to be part of. And she was a nervous wreck. And so one day I said, can I play with you today? And I hooked her up and I had her on my HeartMath on my desktop. And I also had her playing her piece. And I could show her where she got out of coherence. And because I had the score and I'm marking, and I said, okay, oh wow, it's really interesting. Yeah. I was not sure that fingering there. And so anyway, she bought a sensor and she went home. And she came back the next week, and what a great story. Everyone will appreciate this. She says, yeah, I did my yoga in the morning, and then I got the sensor out and I was good. And I did the first 2 pieces and they went great. And then I thought I started messing up and I got really frustrated. So I got up and I left it alone. I went outside, I did some gardening. And I came back in, had some lunch, did a little meditation. I sat down at the piano bench and I said, maybe I should get the sensor and see what I look like. She was red, which is the lowest level of coherence. And she said, that was really surprising. If I hadn't seen that, she said, I would have said it was fine. But she took a few minutes and she got herself back into what I'll call the green level. And she said, boy, oh boy, did that make a difference. Because at that point, then the rest of the recording session went great. So, I love biofeedback. It's a window inside the body. Your body can't ever lie, it doesn't. And I call it seeing is believing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's what that is.
Yeah. And recently I spoke with a gentleman, he does lie detector tests. And we were talking about how everything's measured that way. And your body, when you lie, your body gives it away, right? Your body's saying, no, something's not exactly true here. No. So I have 2 more quick questions for you.
Okay.
What are some of your favorite sounds? Like those sounds that when you hear them, it feels like everything is just perfect in the world.
Well, I have some very favorite piano pieces in the classical world that are just, near and dear to my heart. Probably one of the best would be the one that I used in the documentary when I was playing the Bach Prelude in C major from Book 1 of the Well-Tempered Clavier. But there are many others that live with me, and some Beethoven sonatas and some of the Mendelssohn pieces, and Debussy. I mean, there are many, and in addition, I have some beautiful chimes on my terrace, and they're in the key of E major, and they're made by a very special company, and they are one of the most soothing sounds that I have around my home. I also have a singing bowl in my living room, and I have the shamanic drum, and I infuse myself with whatever is calling me at the moment. Another one of my favorite sounds is of the water, and I'm very blessed to live here in Redding, California, with looking from every window in my home from a bluff down on the Sacramento River and the Sundial Bridge. And to the north of me is Mount Shasta. And there's the wind, the sound of wind, the sound of nature. A couple of days ago, I was over at one of my trails taking a walk, and the you know the rustling of the leaves, and it's been a very dry season, so they're kind of talking a little bit more. But that's just communing with the nature. And then probably one of my biggest joys is my hummingbird feeder. I have a family, and I fill this feeder, which is large, daily. And I get a bevy around, and I know many people see my posts of those on Facebook because they can't believe it. And I'll have about 8 of them or 9 flying around and hovering and wanting to get on one of the 4 little perches where they can get the sugar water. But their sound is just, it makes my heart sing every time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And then where do you see sound going in the future? How do you think sound will be used?
Well, a lot is to be done in the healing world, and I know this through a book that I reference often, and it's called Through the Curtain. And this woman channeled a lot of this in the 1960s about the use of crystals and sound, and also the idea that really what we are here in human form to correct is really our mental and emotional fields. So when I'm talking about what I brought in today, about the intentionality, the how of what you're saying, the whole idea is that really my belief and my passion in teaching is that we are all instruments. We are all sounding board instruments. We have an orchestra within our beings that resonates through every fiber on all levels: physical, mental, emotional, etheric, and beyond. But most times there are strings within this, primarily in the emotional field. They're out of tune. Now, the quote I used at the end of the documentary, perfect example, by Hazrat Inayat Khan, as a Sufi master walks on stage to sing, he tunes his tambura, and the audience will wait, because as he tunes his tambura, they know he's tuning his soul. And when he is done, they understand he's aligned, and he is also at one with them. We are here to learn that we are all these instruments of healing. Every single one of us. These intentions, these sounds, these frequencies, we have the ability, we are the healers within. We are here to awaken our healer within ourselves. It is not outside of us. We came in with everything we need.
I love that. So good. So good. The co-creation aspect, right? Getting in touch first so we can go without, and that collective consciousness aspect to that as well. Dr. Kathleen Riley, thank you so much for taking the time. And there's a whole list of other things that I still want to talk about with you, so maybe another time, including
That would be great.
upcoming projects. So you've got some really exciting stuff coming up too. So yeah, thank you for all of the work that you do. And where can people learn more?
Just on my website, drkathleenriley.com. So drkathleenriley.com.
Okay.
And there will be many, many more things coming. I'm sort of in a birthing phase. Doing the research article actually on the dissertation research is going into a neuroscience journal. And so once that's available, it will be up. Where to find it will be on my website. I don't know if you're sharing, but you can definitely share along with this, the link to the HeartMath Research Institute's website, where they're hosting my documentary. So that's there for everyone to see, along with the trailer and the blog. yeah, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, so I welcome any and all to connect.
Awesome. And I will most definitely include all of those links in the description for the
Yeah.
video portion. So yeah.
And of course there's a book coming up, but that's already in the works right now, so
Yeah.
we'll
I
talk
think
about that another time.
yeah, I was going to say maybe our next conversation, because there's so much still from this one that, want to explore, but I know our time is up for the day. But thank you so much again. Very, very much appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate it. It's always so good to connect with you. It's so nice to share time and space and energy together. So, and with Maestro in the background, if anybody's like, oh, who's the cute little one in the background stretching? So, yes, that is Maestro. So, all right, Dr. Riley, thanks again, and I'm sure we will talk soon.
Yes. Blessings.